there are values in our own society about individual liberty, the rights of the individual to achieve whatever he or she wishes, as being central to the meaning of democracy. And this has a tendency to ignore the need for our dependency on one another, that no one exists in splendid isolation, that all of us are in one way or another dependent upon one another. And I think that this celebration of the individual can sometimes be purchased at the price of indifference to our necessary connection with everyone in order to make our individual life possible. So that focus and celebration of individualism is something that has certainly worked against the sense of our mutual accountability for one another. And connected with that obviously means a connection not only with people in your own neighborhood or your own city or your own society, but with all human beings. I mean, we all want to live a little life and die a little death close to someone who loves us in decency and in peace. Every person wants that, wherever they may be.
How blessed we are to hear his voice once again in this room and to feel his urgency again precisely when we need it so badly. Good evening to you all. For a few of you I have not had the good fortune yet to meet. My name is Ken Chasen, and for the past 22 years it has been my honor to serve as senior rabbi of Leobeck Temple, the synagogue for which Leonard Beerman was founding rabbi and the home to his 65 years in the rabbinate. Ours was the sanctuary he sought again and again to lovingly but forcefully disrupt with his one-of-a-kind mixture of intellect and agitation and conscience and wisdom and moral restlessness. All of you, those gathered to celebrate his legacy through your support of the Leonard I. Beerman Foundation for Peace and Justice, you are the ones who know deeply that Leonard did not disrupt as a goal. He disrupted for a sacred purpose, to do his part and then some, to create a small corner of the world where human beings might take a chance on being tender with one another, and then carry that tenderness out into a world that far too often consciences vast violations of human dignity, even while speaking of goodness. Tonight, of course, so many of us are feeling the rush of time as Leonard's 10th yahrzeit, the 10th anniversary of his death, lies just a couple of weeks away. At once, those 10 years feel both impossibly short and long. Short because most of us can still feel his charge rumbling within us. Did not just the opportunity to sit and to hear his voice again stir up that rumble, especially now. Long, though, because of the relentless degradations of the human story that have filled these years, degradations that I am sometimes actually relieved that Leonard didn't live to see, even as we miss him so deeply. 10 years ago, as he turned to conclude his final sermon, delivered from this very spot, Leonard left us with this description of the Jewish people's mission, which feels in this moment like an emergency call to our spirits. That mission, to assert for all to hear that there is a people in the world that has suffered all of the outrages of history that has been victimized by thousands of lies and deceptions, a people whose bodies were trampled, whose spirits were mutilated in every era of human history. And yet, that people persisted in believing in the infinite task of sanctifying human life. In this moment of our most profound hurting over all the suffering, all the outrages, all the lies and deceptions, the trampled bodies, the mutilated spirits, here in this country, in Israel, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Sudan, in Ukraine, in so many troubled corners of this earth. Let our souls repel the acquiescence that is silence, and in so doing honor Leonard tonight and on all the days to come by recommitting to that sacred mission he voiced in another moment of pitiless bloodshed. Despite it all, let us persist in believing in and acting upon the infinite task of sanctifying human life. Amen.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you all for being here. My name is Mike Farrell. I'm a friend of Leonard's, as you all are. And I'm one for whom Leonard was the North Star, as is probably the case with many of you. The moral north on our compass. I'm always touched to be asked to come back to this wonderful place and take part in this evening, not only because of Joan and Leonard, but because of the sense of community that is here, that responds to the call that Leonard and now Ken have so clearly articulated. And I think sometimes of the surprising depth and length of the connection between us all. Some I don't see but once a year, some I see more often. But seeing Leonard brought tears to my eyes again, thinking of him as I do on almost a daily basis, does the same. And not only because I miss him and he's gone, but because of what he represented. Leonard's grace and Leonard's decency and Leonard's fundamental humanity was, for me, a thing of awe. It really struck a chord. And when I think of a routine and coming here year after year, now we've done this for 6 years, but there were many years before that we were here together. And I was talking to a friend here tonight who reminded me that we were in the same junior high school 70 years ago. Shelley Steyer is the guilty party that reminded me of that. We are indeed lucky to be in this company. I am lucky to be in your company. It is thrilling to recognize and honor once again extraordinary people, as has been the case every year here. And I just want to recount for the 6 years of the Leonard Beerman tributes that happen every year. We have honored such individuals as John Lewis, Norman Lear, the Reverend Pastor Jim Lawson. He always said to me that. I said, should I introduce you as Reverend? He said, I prefer Pastor. Dolores Huerta, Nancy Pelosi, and tonight's honoree stands tall in that company, and I'm anxious to hear, as you are, what she has to say to us. But I simply wanted to take this moment to say how lucky I am and how grateful I am to be part of this company and part of this community, and how simple it is to feel loved when one is in this place, in this company. So thank you for being here. I think Leonard would appreciate and forgive me for coming to a place where my mother would say it's a dress-up event. And I wore my tennis shoes. Let me welcome, I think, the heart of the continuing application of Leonard Beerman in our lives, the one who is responsible for the continuation of the Beerman Foundation, and the one who has taken everything that he had to give her and she had to give him to create this wonderful person in our company, in our family. Leonard's love, Dr. Joan Willens Beerman.
Yep. Well, good evening, and I welcome you once again on behalf of our board for an evening that brings us together to honor and be inspired. I believe that the clip that we just heard from Leonard introduces our evening's theme, which is to pay tribute to the very fact of your presence here tonight. It's at a time when the differences amongst us in our society, our community, even our families, are being so dramatically expressed. And although we come here still with many differences, we're here. We're here. And it isn't just your being here. It really is a thanks for participating in an evening of community. And as Leonard just said, it's a recognition that we need each other, that our individual yearning for safety and security will not be met unless we work toward the vision of a world where all are safe and secure. So this evening, as Mike said, is our sixth, and it happens because we have a board that cherishes those values. Sadly, we lost our treasured member this year, Jim Lawson. But this year, we also gained a new board member, Tracy Rice, who, for more years than she might want to count, worked alongside Leonard, Mike Farrell, and others in the fight for a more just world. So with so much pleasure, welcome, Tracy. And welcome to joining our other board members, Judith Beerman O'Hanlon, Eve Beerman, Salam El Mariati, David Myers, Jane Olson, and Michael Tubbs. And we have much more help, of course. course, Mike Farrell, who holds our event together each year with your presence. Ken Chasen and all of Leo Beck Temple staff and clergy, you give us a home. And tonight, Bill Campbell and the Home and Church Choir. We'd just not be able to do this without all of you. Thank you. And Maria RESSA, we couldn't have chosen anyone more important and timely than you. You are truly the personification of courage and inspiration. So we're so honored to have you here with us tonight. Thank you. So, coincidentally, and you all know, this is obviously you know this is the 10th anniversary of Leonard's death. And thanks to David Myers, who set an absolutely incredible afternoon for all of us. We just had an experience that we felt Leonard's legacy of peace and justice and community and connection. So thank you, David. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And it fits, what we had this afternoon fits so well with the Foundation's mission of carrying forward his legacy by supporting young, courageous leaders. And those of you who didn't hear them this afternoon, just wait until you meet this wonderful group. In keeping with that, Savanti Merrick, an early fellowship recipient, came all the way from his home in Washington, D.C. to introduce this new cohort of fellows. And in that same spirit, our fellow from last year, Justin Jones, flew here from Tennessee so he could pay tribute to Reverend Lawson for us. We're so grateful to you both and to all of our fellows who have come to be with us tonight from far and near. And would you all please stand? All of our fellows. Yay. Thank you. So everybody's been asking what would Leonard say, and I'm asking what would Leonard say tonight. Well, from his Yom Kippur sermon in 2006, this is what he said. It's a hard thing talking to you this year. Such a tumult in the world, brimming with anger and adversaries and terror and hatred and fear, great fear everywhere. Why, unlike you and me, does everybody and everything in this world have to be so complicated? It's confusing to live in this world, in this irrational time, when the values that we Jews have always affirmed are daily being coarsened, mutilated even, by our own country, even by Jews. It is to be confused and angry and frightened. Confusion, anger, and fear seem to me to be thoroughly rational responses to an irrational situation. And then somewhere he said, somewhere else, and I quote, and that's where the rub is for us all. How to face up to the truth of this real world of brutality, fear, mutual rivalry, the need for security, and still retain hope, still work for something different, and still retain our faith in human destiny. And then he said, then we can, and he used Neruda's words, he said, then we can approach a great common tenderness. So please enjoy this evening of hope. Thank you so very much. Thank you. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce Savanti Merrick.
Whew, what an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. And let me just first say, Michael, thank you for keeping with the times. I have my formal Jordans on as well. These are my dress Jordans. It's quite a privilege to introduce these fellows. I'd like to take, if I could, and Joan gave me permission, to just take 2 minutes to speak before that about my favorite topic, myself. It's every politician's favorite topic. But with a purpose. You might know, I was mayor of Ithaca. I'm now president and CEO of People for the American Way, organization that Norman Lear founded. Norman had, I know some of you knew Norman. He passed away a year ago, last Thursday, at 101 years old, which I feel, it's like, where's his commitment, Where's his, he took me under his wing in his late 80s. In his late 80s. Who does that? I mean, how many people do you know are resentful of folks who are 7 years younger than them? Me, by the way. After I introduce the fellows, I'm going to introduce you to Justin Jones, whose remarkable record and ability to move the needle on public opinion makes me, frankly, furious and envious, right? But Norman actually trusted me and lifted me up. We could not have had different, I was born in a homeless shelter. I was never quite as funny as I thought I was, and Norman was always funnier than he even knew. I went on to work in public service, but he really, really invested in me. And this investment is why I'd actually like to, and Joan, I did not warn you about this, but this is why I'd like to talk a bit about money for a moment. Your donations matter maybe more than you can realize. Because I won every prize in the book. You name it. It was Forbes 30 Under 30, Fortune 40 Under 40. It's a JFK New Frontier Award winner. I was even once Rolling Stone's hottest politician of the year. Okay. That was not a laugh line. I'm not sure why, but we'll deal with that later. This one meant the most to me for two reasons. One is going to sound crass, but is quite true. But the other is, of course, because of Rabbi Beerman, what he'd done, his leadership, his example. But the second is, so many young people, and folks bemoan, why is it that they aren't out there on the front lines making change? Why aren't they leading? Why aren't they taking chances? Why are they going to work at UBS or Geico or the gas station? This work is hard. It is hard. I was elected 4 times. My last election in 2019, I won 77% of the vote. And a year later, a year after that, I was so miserable, unhappy, because the reforms that we did inside our police department, the police themselves stopped investigating threats against my life and just started forwarding them to me, right? It's literally, they would just forward them to me. And it was working for the equivalent of a minimum wage. I was ready to quit. But when I got a letter that said, we recognize you, and we want you to keep going, and hey, here's a little bit of money. What it means for a young person whose car just broke and is thinking, this is it, I can't do this anymore, I'm gonna have to go take that job at Goldman Sachs, to get a letter like that means the world. This is what truly effective philanthropy is. So those of you who've already donated, I just want to say thank you and God bless you. Bless you for doing this for these fellows, who it's my privilege to now introduce. I'd like to ask you actually to come as I introduce. Yes, well, let's start then with our magic duo of Zahra and Adnan. Yes, please. So, selected together as leaders of the local Los Angeles branch of Standing Together, a group of LA-based Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Arabs, and allies inspired by the largest progressive grassroots movement of Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel who are standing against the occupation and standing for peace, equality, and social justice. As their nominator said, Adnan and Zahra are a dynamic duo. So Zahra first was born in Toronto, which we, people for the American way, we'll allow it. But thin ice. To Palestinian parents, she graduated with a Bachelor of Science from Western University in Canada and spent the last decade of her professional career in the commercial genomics space, leading teams in support of expanding access to genetic information that can save lives. She's on the board of Tomorrow's Women, a part of the Alliance for Middle East Peace that trains young Palestinian and Israeli women to be compassionate leaders. She's currently applying for medical school. So again, imagine a letter saying, here's a little bit of money, while continuing her work in promoting authentic connections between Palestinians and Israelis. Adnan, born in Jerusalem, is on a mission to bring people together through tech and dialogue. He's a lecturer at UCLA, teaching a course, Design Entrepreneurship for Peace and Impact. He's hosted social media channel focused on compassionate, kind, and empathetic voices from Israel and Palestine. Is a board member of Tech to Peace and founded the Peace Tech Group, a forum for CEOs in peace-building technology and entrepreneurship organizations in Israel and Palestine. Please welcome and congratulate.
Thank you, Savante. What a lovely introduction. And thank you all for being here. I was told I have 2 minutes. So I'm going to start with some inspiration, and then I'm going to thank a lot of people, like an Oscar speech. Okay, first of all, I know for those of you who came to the symposium this morning, very inspirational, lots of hope. Don't let that hope dwindle. Don't leave here with a warm and fuzzy feeling and do nothing with it, please. Use it to push yourself, to talk to someone you've been avoiding, invite the discomfort, and then just keep doing that a little bit every day. I'm proud to be here as a Palestinian who organizes proudly with Israelis. Some of them are here tonight. Together, we are demanding an immediate ceasefire and hostage deal, an end to the military occupation, an immediate rebuilding of Gaza and return of refugees, a real solution for a just peace in Palestine and Israel. In honor of Leonard Beerman, who formed coalitions with his peers outside his tribe to demand a better world for the marginalized and oppressed, I humbly accept this award. I would like to dedicate it to the entire community of the LA supporters of Standing Together. To my co-fellow and adopted brother, Adnan. To the leaders of Standing Together in Israel, Sally Abed, Alon Lee Green, Rola Daoud, the list goes on, who showed me another way. To the staff and alumni of Tomorrow's Women, Amira, Noah, Itaf, Lama, Lana, and the hundreds of women who have become the true leaders and peace activists doing this critical work on the ground under almost impossible conditions. And finally, my incredible family, Yafa, my courageous sister who has impacted countless people, Abir, my mother, who exudes unwavering pride in being a Jerusalemite, Fayez, my father, my hero, an independent thinker, a trailblazer, a feminist who gives me unending support and confidence to be myself no matter what. Thank you, and I will pass it over to
Okay, I second everything Zahra has mentioned, and thank you for the recognition. Now it's time to go back to work. We are still in the middle of it. Let's hold more dialogue. Let's connect with those we disagree with the most, especially those in our community, in our family. That's what Leonard would have done. I have an AI version of him. He told me that. The core of our conflict is trust, and trust is built person by person, story by story. Our conflict is influenced a lot by technology and algorithms, and we, the peace activists, should be on the forefront of tech. I want to imagine that we are doing what we're doing here, the recognition, the awards that we can do next year, hopefully, inshallah, in Jerusalem, with the peace activists on the ground and the peace organizations that I give and I dedicate this recognition to. I'm afraid of mentioning them. They are 180 peace organizations. They are all under the umbrella of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. I welcome you all to go visit the Alliance for Middle East website and see all the member organizations. I have full respect to all of them all. And of course, to my lovely, beautiful, artistic dancer wife, Michal Greenfield. Thank you very much.
Just stand, remain standing, please. That way we can get a great picture. Our next winner of this fellowship is the director, founder, and professor of Loyola Law School's Immigrant Justice Clinic. It's a community-based law school clinic in partnership with Homeboy Industries and Dolores Mission Church. Her nominator described her as, quote, an incredible advocate and teacher who I think would be a great candidate for this award. She received a BA in Spanish from the University of Southern California and her JD from Loyola. The Immigration Justice Clinic, since Marissa began it in 2012, has trained over 100 law students, has represented thousands of immigrant clients, and has maintained a 95% success rate. Currently, yes. Currently, she is establishing Loyola's Binational Migrant Advocacy Project, the first binational immigration law school clinic in the nation for the purposes of bringing services to migrants in transit, deportees, and their families residing in Guadalajara and Tijuana. Additionally, she serves as a visiting professor at ITESO, the Jesuit University of Guadalajara, where she teaches U.S. asylum law. She's had various political appointments, including as a commissioner and chair for the inaugural Los Angeles Commission on Civil Rights, and she has received numerous awards for outstanding contributions. I will say she herself immigrated to the U.S. from Guadalajara at the age of 2, and her desire to pursue a career in immigration law stems from the experience of her family and love of her community. Please welcome and congratulate Marissa Montes.
Something. And thank you so much for the kind introduction. I just want to start by expressing my utmost gratitude. It is an honor to receive this award in remembrance of Rabbi Leonard Beerman, a revolutionary leader in the fight to seek peace and justice. It's also an honor for me to be recognized alongside other amazing fellows, and of course, in sharing space with Maria RESSA. When posed with the question of what peace and justice means to me, I'll admit that I initially struggled to find a definition considering the times we are facing. But yesterday, as I had the opportunity to break bread with my fellow honorees, I was reminded of the solution of community. A driving principle that guides my work, one that I share with my students, and one that was passed down to me by the immigrant community I form part of and get to serve. Community knows struggle and knows the solution. To get a bit personal, I say this was shared with me since my childhood, because it was. Shout out to my mom who's here. I'm gonna get a little personal, perdón mami, but I think there's a lot of validation in authenticity, especially when it relates to your work. Anyways, I say that this came to my that the principle of community is something that I've had since my childhood, because when my family and I came to the United States from Mexico when I was just 2 years old, We left with the same reasons many of my clients do: seeking opportunity and seeking safety. And even though we came with that vision, we still faced struggle. And it wasn't the government that came to our rescue, neither was it a social service provider, nor was it a lawyer, but my community responded. When my family and I faced homelessness, it was a Pakistani family who provided us shelter. When we were alone in a new neighborhood, an Iranian family became our family. When my father faced prolonged incapacitation due to his health, a Honduran family stepped in to support us as my mother worked 2 jobs. Even as a first-generation lawyer, it was other immigrant lawyers, shout out to my mentor, Maria Villa, who showed me the ropes. Also shout out to my hermanas in the law, Karina and Cindy, that came to support. And I have countless other examples of this principle throughout my life, because community sees and understands community. Now, through my work, I have the honor of serving the community that paved the way for me, protected me as a child, and whose sacrifices afforded me the privileges I have today. Community has guided my work. It led to the creation of Loyola's Immigrant Justice Clinic and now our binational migrant advocacy project that will serve both returned and migrants in transit in the country of my birth. Our clinic wins and successes are not mine, but that of the community, for they always know the justice solution, and my students and I just have the tools to get there. And though I gladly accept this recognition, this award is not for me, but for my ancestors and those of the immigrant community that paved the way before me and now come after me. I promise to hold my community as my guiding force for justice and peace. And as always, que viva la comunidad migrante. Thank you.
Okay, wow. 2 more fellows. The first, Hussayn Abdul-Qawi. Hussayn's nominator said, "This is a bright young man from LA. I expect him to do great things in the field of social justice, as well as effective management and public affairs." He's one of our fellows at the Muslim Public Affairs Council and served as a congressional intern in our program last year. He earned his master's degree at Cal State Fullerton and will be obtaining his doctorate at UC Santa Cruz in politics, researching the intersections between Islam and politics. And this is the part that I think you'll all agree is just infuriating and not fair. While getting his degree, he was also a 4-year letterman in collegiate football. Pick a lane, like leave something for the rest. We'll talk later. I mean, from a distance I'll talk because you're much larger. Motivated by both the political climate facing Muslims internationally and domestically, and by the lack of African-American Muslims in academia, Hussayn intends to be an agent of change in foreign policy and wants to be someone who helps educate the next generation of leaders about these so important issues. Please welcome and congratulate Hussayn.
Man, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. What that means in Islam, we say Alhamdulillah, meaning all praise is due to God, and all praise is due to God that I'm able to be in a room of such brilliant and intelligent individuals. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I want to reiterate some points in which I said earlier in the event today, but since my parents are in attendance, I want to reiterate them. I'm nothing without the community in which I came from, my family, and also the people that have helped me here. The Beerman Foundation is now a part of that broad community in which has helped support me by trying to be principles of principally positive change, both domestically and nationwide. But my parents are in attendance, so I would like to thank them first and foremost. Also, the Muslim Public Affairs Council. You have Salam El-Mariati here in attendance, Rebecca Hussaini, Brother Umar Hakim, who I've known my entire life, and also other members at Impact that aren't here that have influenced me to do the work that I do is Muhammad Ali, he works for the Impact Office, as well as an intern in which I met there named Dua Faki. It's a very humbling experience being here, but a point I want to emphasize is being a person who's now in the academia role and taking inspiration from Rabbi Leonard Beerman. He made a lot of political statements, opinions, and stances that weren't popular at the time. And I think now when we face salient political times in which a lot of our positions here and the people on stage, they may not be popular. And the idea is, when it comes to improving the human condition, the popularity does not trump that end to improve the human condition. So I'd like to thank the Leonard Beerman Foundation for providing the space in which you have a lot of these diverse and intelligent people here on stage to be agents of principle change within their community and nationwide. Thank you.
Such a great point. I do just want to point out when he said may not be popular, I'm quite popular. I'm fine, but no, you're exactly right, and that's why investing in these young leaders is just the right thing to do. Our final fellow that's joining our family and our community of a very proud family, I should say, Joan, by the way, of Rabbi Beerman Fellows who stay in touch with each other, tease each other, support each other. We want to welcome to that family Yehudah Webster. Yehudah's nominator said, yes, he has been on the front lines of organizing around community security and racial justice. He's also developing a powerfully Jewish voice on these issues. Yehudah is both a spiritual activist and a community organizer, working to animate and integrate anti-racist behaviors and culture into communities, as well as supporting collective organizing, advocacy, and direct service efforts to dismantle racism systemically. Currently, Yehudah is a senior faculty at Curva, an organization dedicated to spiritual practice and action for change. He is co-founder of Amud, Jewish Education for Jews of Color by Jews of Color, sort of like a FUBU for, that's very specific. Some of you were also born in 87. Ask your neighbor if it, and is presented in a wide variety of settings. Yehudah is a graduate of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice's Grace Paley Organizing Fellowship, Bend the Arc Salah Leadership Program, Curva's Ovdem Fellowship, and was a recipient of the Pomegranate Prize through the Covenant Foundation. He was featured in the documentary 40 Days of Teshuvah. Please welcome and congratulate Yehudah Webster. My mitzvah, my bar mitzvah would have gone forward.
Shalom, good evening. Thank you for responding. I want to begin with gratitude. Thank you, Joan, and to the Beerman Foundation for this honor and award, and just want to offer my congratulations to my fellow honorees. It's really an honor to share the stage with you all. I also want to give thanks to, of course, to Hashem, to the Creator, for continuing to help me grow in my leadership. I want to give thanks to my ancestors, particularly my grandparents, Stella Taylor, my grandfather, Yehudah Webster, my parents who are here tonight, Moria and Shaloma, for all your care and putting me in a position to do this work. Thank you to my fiance, Diane, Rabbi Aryeh Cohen, and the community for really uplifting me in a time when things are so dark, and making visible the impact of my efforts and encouraging me to continue to do the work of supporting those most vulnerable in our society, continuing to fight for justice, equity, and peace. You know, in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, I was organizing full-time in New York and had been organizing for many years alongside many others, striving to bring police budgets in balance with all the other social services that actually help communities to thrive and not just survive and get by. And even though we had the whole world behind us, even though we had a supermajority of progressives in the state Senate, in the city council, we still lost. And in that moment, it became apparent to me that our own devices are not enough. That we need spiritual intervention. That we need the support from on high. And so following our loss in the budget, which is really a moral document and reflection of our values, I and others organized a 40-day action where at evening every day we gathered in Brooklyn in Grand Army Plaza and we cried out to the heavens for that spiritual intervention such that we could be more effective and sustained and resilient in our own efforts, and to really call on that spiritual power. We think about power as physical often, material resources, but to also to leverage the spiritual power to help us overcome our limitations, because we've been striving for 400 years and black people are still being murdered in the streets. And so I'm blessed to be able to work for an organization, Kirva, where we work to equip advocates and organizers today with the spiritual tools and wisdom, the Jewish spiritual tools and wisdom of Musar and Chassidut, to support us all in being more effective, sustained, and resilient in our efforts for justice. And so I'm so grateful to be able to do this work alongside all of you and all of you here today. Thank you. Thank you for this honor.
Please congratulate and welcome the 2024 Rabbi Leonard Beerman Fellow. Thank you. What? Oh, yes, yes, thank you. One more bit of business I get to do. I get to introduce to you somebody who needs very little introduction. I could tell you that he's one of the youngest state legislators ever in American history, that he shook up the world when in Tennessee he refused to be quiet and to allow an obscene view of civility halt his march towards justice. And when the powers that be removed him from office, he came storming back. Just one thing I haven't had a chance to tell Justin directly. I was telling you that a friend of mine is a lawyer who's doing pro bono work helping folks leave Gaza, mostly on medical. And she was so discouraged by the system. 3 months ago, there was a young girl, she's 7 years old, she lost an eye, and she couldn't get out because she didn't have reasons. And she was discouraged. I mean, she'd been doing this work for a long time, and she said, a pox on all of this, and all of you politicians, she said to me. I ducked it, but she was aiming it at me. And she went to a conference for her actual work down in Nashville, where she said, I just met somebody who has given me hope again. And I could tell you that little girl was airlifted out 10 days ago because they need to not give up. That is the ripple effects of leadership. That is what Justin Jones is doing for this country and this world. Please welcome our very own Justin Jones.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Amen. Thank you, home and choir. I'm not the choir, so thank you. I come to you today from Music City, Nashville, so I thought I would bring some of our movement with us here today. And I thought that song was appropriate because we're here to, at this portion of our program, to honor a bright light. A bright light, a powerful life force, and mentor to so many of us who we lost this year, Reverend Jim Lawson. Rev. Lawson's work was made for times like this. Periods of polarization and conflict, and a time when marginalized people are facing greater exclusion. He was expelled from my divinity school, Vanderbilt Divinity School, for organizing the sit-ins in Nashville. He was arrested countless times and repeatedly brutalized. Sitting down as a way to stand up, enduring days in jail cells and nights of bomb threats. And yet still he showed us a very important lesson for this moment in our history. He taught us that there is a better way, that we are not powerless. And so coming back here today is full circle. I actually want to play something because it's a voicemail of Reverend Lawson calling me last year about 5 times from a blocked number, trying to make sure that I was a part of the Beerman Foundation.
I can give $10,000 to a black activist. I'm just in the process of trying to call him. The Beerman Foundation has $10,000 to give him just for being who he is.
So I don't think Reverend Lawson knew he left that voicemail for me, but it's something that I treasure. Last year when we were expelled from the Tennessee House, we got a lot of calls, and that is one of the most important calls that I got, because not only was he calling about the Beerman Foundation, he was calling to give counsel about how to respond nonviolently in a country that is addicted to violence, a country that is rooted in the mythology of violence. And so last year in Nashville, for those who don't remember, for those who don't know, a mass shooter took the lives of 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults in my community. And rather than allow us to talk about the issue of gun violence, this gun-sick nation, the legislature where I serve, chose to cut off our microphones, silence any conversation about the issue of gun violence, saying we can have a moment of silence and that is it. But we have to move on to normal business. And what is normal business in America? It's the reality that gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children. It's a reality that in my state, it's easier to get a gun than it is to vote. And so what I remember was talking to Reverend Lawson, who actually really pushed me in 2020 to be a better advocate. Because I talked to Reverend Lawson, called him, I said, Reverend Lawson, we were outside the Capitol. This was before I was elected. I ran because in 2020, I was banned from the state Capitol. I was arrested 18 times and banned by the troopers. And so I talked to Reverend Lawson about it, but he said, what was your strategy? What was your nonviolent strategy? It can't just be a flash in the pan, but what is the strategic goal? And how are you expanding your coalition? How are you bringing people into your movement? And it really was something that was uncomfortable to hear. saying, I got arrested 18 times, what else can you do? You know, but to know that we want our movements to be meaningful. And for those who have not been to Tennessee, Reverend Lawson is a patron saint of Nashville. He is the reason why Nashville became the first southern city to desegregate our lunch counters, because he trained students in what Gandhi called satyagraha, soul force, truth force, which he brought to the South. And so that same spirit, right outside the Capitol, we have a historical marker that reminds of this history. But every day I walk into my office, greeting the same troopers who brought me to jail, I pass these placards, which are not just moments in history, but are actually prophetic messages saying, continue the work. That monuments are nice, but movements are better. And that is what Reverend Lawson has taught us. And so from the Nashville sit-ins to the freedom rides, to the anti-Vietnam War protests, to the Memphis sanitation worker strike, and to the ongoing labor struggles of today, Reverend Lawson was a key tactician, backbone, and one of the most principled architects of the movement. He was our apostle of nonviolence. He embodied the idea, the truth, that faith and justice are inseparable. Reverend Lawson taught us to never be quiet as long as the largest poverty group in America is women and children, as long as our nation continues to be the most violent nation in culture in the history of humankind, and as long as our economy is not rooted in freedom, but is rooted in plantation capitalism. We honor Reverend Lawson and Rabbi Beerman by continuing the fight against the forces they resisted and recommitting our souls, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and our strength to dismantle the wrong in our midst. This is how we take up the task of building a new world that they gave their life's work to for us and for generations yet to come. Sisters and brothers and friends, in this moment of rising authoritarianism and fascism, we can turn to Reverend Lawson's words about courage displacing fear, love transcending hate, and how justice overcomes injustice. In a time when it seems democracy has fallen to despots and authoritarians, Reverend Lawson's teachings remind us that we are not powerless. They remind us of a better way. One of the most powerful things that I think Reverend Lawson's work, and I also want to honor Miss Dorothy Wood Lawson, his wife, who we also lost this year. And I think some of the Lawson families here wanted to make sure that we honor them. But one of the greatest things that they taught us was that during that time, they faced the supermajority of white supremacy controlling every aspect of our government, as we are on the precipice of facing now. But what Reverend Lawson taught those students at Clark Memorial United Methodist Church, where I was baptized, in those nonviolence trainings, is that we are going to train ourselves to be a people who already are desegregated, who are people who cannot be segregated, who are people who uproot and uphold our dignity, whatever the systems say, that we know who and whose we are. And so as we enter into this new era of MAGA Trump extremism, let us resist not because of who they are, but because of who we are, and the nation that we want to give to the next generations who are counting on what we do in this moment. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. We love you, Reverend Lawson. We thank you for being a saint. And we know that as we fight and as we sing those freedom songs, that their spirits are calling us, that Reverend Lawson is calling us, that Miss Dorothy Lawson is calling us, that Fannie Lou Hamer, that Ella Baker, that they are calling us and saying, we are counting on you to pick up that torch and move the struggle, the nonviolent struggle in America, is what Reverend Lawson calls it, to move that struggle forward. And so, power to the people. Thank you all.
This is the whole choir of many of us here. This is our fourth time singing today. If we don't I think you should give us some applause. We sang our 8 o'clock service, our 11 o'clock service, a 2 o'clock rehearsal for Messiah, which started at 3 o'clock. And I mention Messiah because Reverend Lawson sang in the bass section many years, Messiah with us. Amen.
I feel younger and taller and stronger because of what I have experienced this evening. And I'm sorry, this is not part of the program, but I wanted to tell you that I was in Virginia yesterday at a memorial for the death of a friend of mine, a man who was in prison for 38 years, 11 of them on death row for a crime he did not commit. And he never stopped believing that there was hope. And when I hear this kind of community, this sense of possibility that these people represent and that these words represent and that the memories of Jim and John and Nancy and Leonard represent, I want to say, I don't want to embarrass anyone here. I love you, all of you. Thank you for being here. I want to now introduce Rob Eshman. Rob is the former publisher and editor-in-chief of the Jewish Journal and is currently senior consultant of the Forward. You will hear more about the Forward from Rob, and he will introduce our honoree this evening.
Thank you, Mike. So when I was a freshman in college, I wrote a letter to Rabbi Beerman. The Soviet Union had just invaded Afghanistan, and President Jimmy Carter decided to reinstitute the draft to demonstrate toughness. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to end it killing people I didn't know in a country I couldn't find on a map. And it seemed to me the best way to stop the inexorable march to war was not to take the first step. But refusing to register was a federal crime. And I was facing 7 years in prison, which could be really bad and which could really upset my parents. So I wrote Rabbi Beerman, and I asked him what I should do. He was my rabbi, and in my relatively brief time on earth, I'd never met anybody with such outspoken moral clarity and courage. In my journalism career, I've come across many people. I've come across many tonight who are outspoken and courageous. Those are the ones who tend to make news. But among them all, Maria RESSA stands out as the embodiment of Rabbi Beerman's legacy. Maria was born in Manila, Philippines, then spent her childhood in the United States, where she learned 3 lessons early on. Take risks, face your fears, stand up to bullies. After completing her studies at Princeton, Maria worked as a reporter for CNN in Asia, where she quickly rose to the ranks to become Manila's bureau chief and CNN's lead investigative reporter in Asia. She eventually co-founded the independent news site Rappler in 2012, which became a key platform for investigative journalism in the Philippines, holding those in power to account, particularly for her coverage of the government's war on drugs with its widespread corruption and human rights abuses. Her courageous journalism and outspoken defense of press freedom put her at odds with the Duterte administration regime. In 2020, Maria, despite an international outcry, was convicted of cyber libel. She faced harassment, intimidation, a prolonged legal battle, which included multiple arrests and periods of detention. Despite these efforts to silence her, Maria remained defiant in her commitment to free speech and independent journalism. In 2021, Maria, alongside Russian journalist Dmitry Muratov, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. They were honored, in the words of the Nobel Committee, for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. The very idea that a journalist would win the Nobel Peace Prize is so counterintuitive in the time we live in, when journalism is all about clickbait and about leveraging algorithms to generate more hate so you generate more traffic, when the #1 news channel in America is a rat's nest of BS. But journalism done right, and that's why I love it so much, when it pursues truth, when it holds the powerful to account, when it does what journalism does best, I believe it does bring peace and understanding. I don't need to tell you that Maria, all of us, are still very much in this fight for human rights and truth. Some weeks it feels like there's even some hope. The dictator of Syria just left the building. The mullahs in Iran are weakened. In Romania and Georgia, there's been a groundswell of resistance to Putin. I was looking on Twitter or X a couple days ago, speaking of a rat's nest, and I saw an image of some activist in Georgia who was holding a copy of Maria's book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, translated in Georgian. But as Maria wrote in that book, which I beg you all to read, it's a long battle. Today, she wrote, an emergent wave of right-wing populist leaders uses social media to question and break down reality, triggering rage and paranoia on a bed of exponential lies. This is how fascism is normalized. But Maria, through her career, has shown that by using technology, journalism, and community, you can fight back. She writes, you can fight back and you could build forward. So Rabbi Beerman wrote me back about whether I should register for the draft, and he said that I should follow my conscience. Of course, it was the last thing I wanted to hear, but I listened. My gesture had zero impact on America, on the Soviet Union, on Afghanistan. In other words, sometimes you stand up for what you believe and you might as well have shot a squirt gun at a forest fire. But Maria didn't just make a gesture. She created a strategy. She created a whole movement. And she showed that when you devote your considerable intellect and all your talents to fighting for what you believe is right, you really do change the world. That's what Maria did in the Philippines. That's what she did for journalism. That's how she's inspired countless others around the world. In a 2002 invocation, Rabbi Beerman said, "We pray for all those who work for a world of reason and compassion. May courage be given to all those who work to abate life's miseries and heal its wounds, who are comrades in the only battle worth waging, the battle to create a more humane world." Maria continues to battle for a more humane world. She is a true heir to the legacy of Rabbi Beerman, and she honors us tonight by accepting the Leonard I. Beerman Award for Social Justice in Action. Maria RESSA.
Podiums are always taller than I am. So I apologize to you beforehand. You can see me, right? This is my first time speaking in a temple. It's hard to have firsts when you're 61 years old. First, thank you so much for recognizing. I mean, first of all, what Rob said, that didn't sound like me. I thought I was just putting one foot in front of the other. But thank you for recognizing what we do at Rappler in the Philippines, the role of journalism, and you'll see journalism evolved because of the tech that rules our lives and brings you to that station he didn't actually name, right? But I have to also say thank you, Joan, the Beerman Foundation, and my gosh, massive congratulations to the fellows. Y'all were really awesome. I mean, how to follow. Adnan and Zahra, Marissa, Hussayn, and Yehudah. I mean, it was a privilege last night to have been able to have dinner at Joan's house with you, and then to actually realize, wow, we could solve all of the worst problems of the world because we were all so very, very different, and yet we shared the same space with absolute safety and honesty. You know, that is, Rabbi Beerman would say, right? That love, and I'll paraphrase it, that the only way you can be truly honest is if you love, or that love gives you the ability to be truly honest. Otherwise, you don't bother. That safe space last night, well, sadly, this isn't the world we live in today. But it proved that night, last night proved that it's possible to have it, and it's actually not so hard. It was quite easy to create it. All it needs is our collective will and our empathy. I told them this last night, now I want to share this with you. In the last few weeks, I feel like I've been chasing my shadow around the world. I was in Reykjavik for a gathering of more than 400 women leaders shortly after the US elections, led by Iceland's female president, then on to Johannesburg, where 600 civil rights activists and leaders gathered to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the end of apartheid, or the beginning of South African democracy, and then on to Cape Town to deliver on the 40th anniversary of Desmond Tutu's Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. I got to give his lecture. So in many ways, Rabbi Beerman and Desmond Tutu, their words started coming together in my head, and they had many, many things in common. But the worst, and I've gone through many depressing times, I would say the worst 4 hours I've had in recent months is in Nelson Mandela's house. As chair of the World Movement for Democracy, we had a 4-hour meeting of about a dozen of us. The steering committee comes from a dozen different countries in the world, and we talked about the rise of the far right globally, how we are electing illiberal leaders democratically. You know, we pointed out as of early this year, for example, VDEM in Sweden said that 71% of the world is now under autocratic rule. 4 or 5 years ago, I pointed to 2024 as the tipping point year for elections. Half the world voted this year. Well, I worry that we may have set the stage for the end of democracy. And that 4-hour meeting, the depressing 4-hour meeting, we had a leader from Venezuela, Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, to South Korea. She actually said that something is going to happen within 3 days. So, you know what happened in South Korea, right? We had martial law, and then within 24 hours rescinded it. France, which lost its prime minister, to Georgia, which you heard a little bit, but you know, it's had 10 days of violent protests, and Kate, who's a member of our steering committee, has pointed out at least 500 people were arrested. She says 270, many of them journalists, were beaten badly by government thugs. For years now, I've shown data in different countries around the world that technology is the match that set the world's dry kindling on fire. Mark Zuckerberg said, move fast, break things, and big tech broke democracy. I learned that the fracture lines of society, pounded open, are the same regardless of which country or culture you come from. The main two are gender and race, fueled oftentimes by religion. Sexism that turns into misogyny, and racism that finds its way into constitutions like Hungary, where it has this name, white replacement theory. You'll hear it in the news as immigration or inflation. But if you really dig deeper, what you're seeing inciting fear, anger, and hate is gender and race. When I turn on the news, it almost feels like we're already in World War III. From the trenches of Ukraine to the rubble in Gaza, the forgotten battlegrounds of Sudan, Myanmar, all of those battles that you don't hear about because forgotten conflicts around the world. But these wars aren't fought with just missiles and tanks. They're fought with algorithms, with disinformation, and the systematic destruction of truth. Big tech. First the American companies from this state, from Silicon Valley, and then you have to add China's TikTok, transformed social media from a tool of connection into a weapon of mass behavioral engineering. These platforms are not neutral technologies. They're sophisticated systems designed to exploit our deepest psychological vulnerabilities. They monetize our outrage and hate, amplify our divisions, and systematically erode our capacity for nuanced thinking and real empathy. In 2018, MIT said that lies spread 6 times faster on social media. Imagine the world upside down, right? You tell a lie 1 million times, it becomes a fact. In 2017, in the Philippines, we actually had the data that showed that you exponentially pound something open, and you lace it with fear, anger, and hate, and it becomes even more viral. And here are the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016. Imagine, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we have no shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problem, let alone the existential ones of climate change. We can't have journalism we trust. We can't have democracy. This business model of big tech, we didn't have a name for it until 2019. Surveillance capitalism is built on a fundamental betrayal of human dignity, where data privacy has become a myth and AI and algorithms have cloned and manipulated us, creating echo chambers that exacerbated existing biases, prioritizing conflict over understanding, monetizing human attention at the expense of social cohesion. This is not an accident. It is a deliberate design that brings in hundreds of billions of dollars every year to these tech companies. In this world, people of faith have a critical role that goes beyond your individual belief. Your congregations, your interfaith networks, your community organizations, they're not just sanctuaries of spiritual reflection. You're on the front line. You have become a frontline defender of our shared democratic values. In How to Stand Up to a Dictator, my latest book, I write about how the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, has stayed with me, guided me throughout my life. I am not a wonderfully practicing Catholic. I've gotten better. When Pope Francis called us 3 years ago, he made me better. But the golden rule, it helped me define courage when I really needed it. In a world that's increasingly shaped by lies, it's the courage to speak when silence is safer, the courage to build bridges when walls are just easier, and the courage to stand for truth even when it feels like the entire world is against you. I like the South African word Ubuntu. Literally, it means I am because we are. It's an antidote to many of our problems today. So really, thank you for inviting me into your community. But this word Ubuntu is this universal truth that faith communities, that your community embodies. From what I've heard today, the pain of one is the pain of all. When big tech rewards the worst of who we are, I mean, when you're talking about how you make a decision on the draft or not, when you have to make that decision, the old cartoon of the devil and the angel on your shoulder, there's the devil telling you, do it, do it, do it, do it. And the angel saying, no, do the right thing. Well, what technology has done is it's kicked the angel off your shoulder, grew the devil, and gave it a direct line into your nervous system. Ubuntu teaches us that our fates are interconnected, that the fight for truth, justice, and peace is not someone else's battle out there, it is ours. And that has been what's so wonderful about listening to everyone tonight. I would like to suggest 4 points of action. The first, I said this last night, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Having so many different and varied faiths, cultures here in the room is incredible. But why do we have to do that? Because we have to build and strengthen trust now to close the fracture lines of society that information warfare, information operations will try to pound open. It pits us against each other. And the only way you get through that is the speed of trust. It is the bridge that you build now before you need it. The second, and you've heard this, speak truth with moral clarity. Rabbi Beerman had that. In this world today, silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Whether it's systemic racism, economic inequality, or the erosion of our democratic norms, what I call death by 1,000 cuts, people of faith must reclaim your prophetic voice. Demand transparency and accountability from those who control our public information ecosystems, from governments to big tech to the media. The third, protect the most vulnerable. Support journalists, human rights defenders, and activists who risk their lives. Remember the Martin Niemöller quote from Germany. Our Philippine version was published by our largest newspaper after I was first arrested. And it was short, 2 sentences. First, they came for the journalists. We don't know what happened next. Your networks can be powerful shields for marginalized communities. Support immigrants, religious minorities, LGBTQ+, and others who face discrimination, because online, if you are marginalized in the real world, you are further marginalized online. Your collective vigilance can prevent the normalization of hate. And then finally, the last one, the fourth. and I think so many of you do know this, recognize your own power. Because building peace is not reserved for heroes. It is the collective work of all of us, of people, the cellular level of democracy, people who refuse to accept and to live lies. Rappler would not have survived without the help of our community, and that has always reminded me about the goodness of human nature. You are powerful and can be part of this tidal wave of change for good, because God knows for the last decade it's been death by 1,000 cuts. Now it's time to stem the tide. So let me repeat them again. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Speak truth with moral clarity. Protect the most vulnerable. And recognize your own power. Even at the worst of times, hope is not passive. I get hope from action. It is active, relentless, and you've heard this pointed out, it is strategic. Our faith traditions carry centuries of resilience. We need to share those stories of transformation. There's this T.S. Eliot quote I love, and he talked about the present moment of the past. He was talking about it in terms of literature, right? That the latest novel you read is changed and shifted by the fact that you read Shakespeare. But this latest novel has changed your understanding of Shakespeare, right? That's kind of cool. It's the present moment of the past. Your understanding and appreciation of Shakespeare is affected by the latest novel you read. In this present moment of our shared past, we have a choice. And it will create our future as much as change how we look at our past, right? This present moment. We can allow the fracture lines of our society to break open, stay quiet, duck, or we can work, heal the growing divides, stand up, have the courage to speak, because this is it. This time matters. What you choose to do matters. Thank you for this honor, and more importantly, thank you so much for your work to heal the world. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Salam Al-Mariati.
I'm David Myers.
This is Saturday Night Live. No. Long paper.
Or my Salam Al-Mariati.
Yeah, we were both dear friends and disciples of Rabbi Leonard Beerman.
And we were both profoundly affected and inspired by Leonard and his commitment to justice.
And we have been deeply inspired by today, the symposium, and tonight's event featuring the remarkable Maria RESSA and 6 extraordinary social justice fellows.
I think it's 5. If you've been inspired like us, then we invite you to join in the work of the Beerman Foundation to assure that Leonard's example be continued and reinterpreted so creatively for years to come. So please consider making a contribution above and beyond the ticket you purchased to the Beerman Foundation. This will enable us to identify and support the work of the exceptional social justice fellows and to honor the work of people like Maria, who share Leonard's vision of the urgent need for a better world.
You can do so by using the QR code on the back of your programs, or by going online to the Beerman Foundation website, or by writing a check. Whatever form you use, you can be assured that your gift will advance the principles of justice, equality, and peace on which Leonard's rabbinate stood. There was only one Leonard Beerman, but he joined arms with his dear friends Maher Hathout, Jim Lawson, George Regas, and Ed Bacon to forge a remarkable interfaith coalition. It is our job to continue in the path of these giants, so please do so and consider giving.
And now, to conclude the evening, we will join the Holman Church Choir in singing, "Let There Be Peace on Earth."